Hi, second grade. Welcome to reading lesson 9. I've been doing a little bit of thinking about all the informational text we've been reading, not just about the Earth's surface, but also all the informational text that you've been reading independently. Have you ever read so much information that it's just hard to remember it all? I know I have. Authors give us a lot of information, and we can't possibly remember it all. So good readers of informational text really stop and think about what is the most important. What are those most important details that we want to remember about a text? And that's what we're going to review and talk about today. We're going to think about how I can determine the most important points in a text. Let's get started. Yesterday, as we read the last section of our book, we learned that rocks can change, and I found that pretty interesting. So I wanted to read with you an article about how rocks can change. This article is called Weathering and Erosion, and it's going to teach us a little bit about the process that rocks go through in order to change. So let's read it together, and then we'll stop and think about the most important points. What are weathering and erosion? Weathering is what happens when part of a rock is loosened. Parts of rocks are usually loosened by nature. Erosion, and then this tells me how to say it, erosion, happens after weathering. It is the process of moving water, moving ice, or wind carrying away part of a rock. So now let's read about each of those. Moving water. Moving water can cause weathering and erosion. Have you ever seen waves crash against rocks on the shore? The water can chip off small pieces of rock and carry them away. As more waves hit the rocks, more pieces are chipped off and carried away. Because of this, the rocks get smaller and smaller over time. And look at this image that the author included to help us understand. It says this is weak rock, and then this is pointing to the sea, and then it says waves erode weak rock to carve out a cave. So I guess as the water hits it, it pulls the rocks away until a cave is formed. Pretty cool. Moving ice. Moving ice can cause weathering and erosion. Some mountains have solid sheets of ice near the top. During warmer weather, a bit of ice melts. Then the sheet of ice may move slowly down the mountain. As the solid ice moves, it scrapes rocks, breaking off pieces. Then the pieces are taken away by the moving ice. And they have a diagram over here to kind of help us with that. So it looks like the blue is showing us the direction that the ice is moving, and the red is pointing to the part of the rock. So here the ice freezes to the rock. As ice moves, the rock is torn out and taken away. So that is how the moving ice must cause the erosion. Blowing wind. Wind also causes weathering and erosion. Wind can blow sand and dirt. It can carry the dirt far away. In some places, strong winds will push sand against the rocks. Over a long period of time, the wind wears down those rocks. And I always think it is so cool. I've seen this once or twice out in nature where there's like a hole in the rock. And the caption says, moving wind has caused erosion of this rock. Now the rock has a hole in it that looks like an arch. Very cool. You may remember that in Unit 1, we learned how to determine which were the most important points in a text. We did this by turning the heading into a question. And then we think, what does the author write to answer the question? And what do the images show to answer the question? If we answer that, then we can find out the most important points that the author's trying to include in their text that we need to remember. I can follow these steps to find the most important points in our article about weathering and erosion. Let's start with the first section. We need to turn the heading into a question. Well, guess what? We got pretty lucky here because the author already did that for us. What are weathering and erosion? So I need to stop and think. What does the author write to answer the question? So what does the author write to answer the question, what is weathering? Here the author says, weathering is what happens when a part of rock is loosened. Parts of rocks are usually loosened by nature. Now, I don't want to write all of that down. That's a lot. I can just summarize it by saying, weathering means rock is loosened by nature. because that's essentially what the author wrote. And then I need to answer this part of the question. What is erosion? Well, erosion happens after weathering, and it is the process of moving water, moving ice or wind, carrying away part of a rock. Again, I don't want to write all of that. I just want to summarize it in my own words. So I can put erosion is when water, ice, or wind carries rock away, because that's just a summary of what the author was saying. Now I need to think, what do the images show to answer the question? Well, did the author include any images for this section? Nope. So the author didn't really give us any important points in the images. So now I know these are the two important points I need to remember from this section of the article. Let's take a look at the next section. Remember, if we want to find the most important points, we can turn the heading into a question. Well, the heading is moving water. But I can't just say, what is moving water? Because this part of the article really wasn't about what is moving water. Really, I need to think, what was the author talking about here? Well, the author was really talking about how moving water can cause erosion. So I can use that for my question. How does moving water cause weathering and erosion? Now I need to think, what does the author write to answer that question? Well, the author writes a lot of things, but I can just summarize what the author was saying. The author said that it chips off the rock and carries it away. I can also think, what does the image show to answer the question? So what did this image show that tells me about moving water causing weathering and erosion? Well, the image showed that it can carry rock away and make a cave. So I jotted that on my paper. Now I know that the two most important points from this section are that water chips off rock and carries it away, and waves can carry rocks away and make caves. I found the most important points of this section of the article. All right, second grade, now it's time for you to try. On the next Nearpod slide, you're going to see this page as a Draw It slide. I want you to follow our steps to find the most important points in this section of the article. You're going to turn the heading into a question and type the question right here using the typing tool. Then you're going to think, what does the author write to answer that question? Just summarize it. You don't have to type everything, but what does the author tell us about the answer to your question? And jot it over here. Then think, what does the image show to answer your question? And jot it over here. And then we'll talk about it. Head to the next Nearpod slide.